going on, fellas?
What's up, brother?
Happy to be here, man. Welcome the new guy on the show. If you see the old one up there in the top right hand corner, that's Chris Garza.
My old college roommate.
Yeah, he's
right here.
He's on.
I'm trying to understand who this guy is.
He's on mute right now. This other guy's just his ego. So
yeah, I don't know. We have another guest here. We have our normal crew. Me and Mike are here, but I don't know who this other guy is.
My Lord, man.
Can you introduce yourself to everyone?
It's this 18-year-old Chris.
Yeah, I had to go into Valero, Houston today, and one of the requirements, safety requirements in a lot of the refineries, or all of the refineries really, is that you can have no facial hair, just for, the simple fact that if something combusts or inflames itself, they don't want you to actually, burn your face off. So you can't have the little German mustache right there if you want to. I can't rock that very good. I can't rock the soul patch either, so I got to roll full. Or
this last time you tried?
Or I run around looking like an 18-year-old. But Mike said the Marine Corps mustache contest is in, so we're gonna roll with it.
Oh, that's hilarious.
My God, man.
Yeah, I think I would have to go with no video for a while if I shaved all this off. Yeah, I don't want to see this booty lip. It doesn't work out well.
Not good, man.
Yeah, no doubt.
I'm embarrassed right now.
So we are also joined. We have Richard on the show. Richard Cowles. Is it Cowles or Coles?
Coles, trick spelling.
Coles. Okay. All right. I didn't even think about it before the show to get that clarified. But Richard grew up in Houston. Went to Bel Air High School, so an H-Town native here. He earned his BA in mathematics from UT Austin and did his student teaching at McCallum. He's also about to start his 24th year at McCallum. So that's quite a long time. And one thing I like is you're a math nerd, right? I love math. My kids hate it that I like math so much. They call me weird. And so that's pretty cool. But you also, you've taught algebra, honors, regular and repeater, also geometry, AP statistics since 2001. You're a College Board consultant and you give trainings for new and experienced statistics teachers. And you've also authored lessons from 2 publications. And you also spent 3 years in Chad with the United States Peace Corps, teaching middle school mathematics. So you've had quite the career. Quite the career going on.
I've been very lucky.
Well, welcome to the show. We're really looking forward to this. It's something that I think a lot of people, it touches anyone. Like, this whole COVID aspect is reaching us in a completely different way. We're at July 22nd here in Houston. School's supposed to start in a little less than 2 weeks. And we don't necessarily know what's going on, where we're going. They're still having weekly meetings to discuss this whole thing. What's going on in Austin? How are they actually approaching the COVID situation?
It's very similar. Austin is in a little bit of a difficult situation because we just hired a new superintendent. So that transition has not helped having a leader to say, let's get this figured out. There was a broadcast today for, 90 minutes that basically kind of was vague and didn't give a whole bunch of information. And I think a lot of that is TEA. The people that we have to listen to have been very vague and have not given a lot of direction. I think a lot of the schools and districts have been brainstorming about different ways of doing things. I think a lot of them have been trying to think of kind of what I would call a hybrid, where you have some kids at school some days, some kids at schools and other days, but, TEA says, that's not the way we want to do that. And so it's, everyone's just kind of stuck. And I really think that this is going to be kind of a phase-in thing. I think they're likely going to start with the younger kids and kind of see what works well since they are the lowest at risk of having severe symptoms, and see kind of how it works. They are on 9-week grading periods, so my guess is they'll do 9 weeks K through 2, and then they'll do the next 9 weeks 3 through 5. And if things seem to be going well in whatever model that they're using, then they'll roll in the middle school and high school in the spring. But that's all just a complete guess on my part.
Hey, Richard, why don't you tell everybody, before we get too far into the what's happening, what's going to happen. Why don't you just kind of give everybody an idea of how you got into teaching in the first place and why you got into teaching. It's always good to hear somebody's perspective on why they chose to be a teacher. It's not like you guys get paid $1 million, so
sure. Background. So first of all, I come from lineage. My father is a retired college professor. My mother is a retired high school English teacher. My uncle is a retired elementary school principal. My aunt is a retired middle school math teacher.
That's impressive, man.
So there's a lot of lineage in there, but I started college thinking I was an electrical engineer. The first 2 years of electrical engineering went very well. It was very logical. And then year 3, it became very abstract, which went away from my strengths. And my heart really wasn't in it. As a lot of people said that I was too social and liked to talk too much to be an electrical engineer. So I was kind of lost. So I started doing some volunteer work where I went to East Austin and I taught 1 science lesson a week at Blackshear Elementary and just had a blast. It was so much fun interacting with the kids. I enjoyed explaining things, and that's kind of when I had my epiphany that, like my folks, I was an educator. I also kind of reflected back, and I remember 8th grade algebra. The teacher would explain something, and then she would start walking around the room to help other students, and then 2 minutes later, people would start asking me questions, and I would work the other side of the room. So I've always been a teacher. I just didn't realize it until college. So that inspired me to get my teaching certificate. And when I was getting my teaching certificate, I had to take a language and really wanted to, being in Texas, I wanted to learn Spanish. So I went to Mexico and spent 6 weeks at University of Guanajuato. And that's kind of when I had my experience of learning another language and being in another country and experiencing a different culture. And that's kind of what catapulted me to Peace Corps. So after I got my math degree and I got my teaching certificate, I was in Chad for 3 years. I taught middle school mathematics. The resources in Africa are, very limited. My classes were usually 95 to 110 students. I had to teach it in French. I had a piece of wood painted black, and that was my blackboard.
Wow.
And no electricity, no running water. And school went from 8 until 12:30 because the school had no facilities to feed everyone, so everyone left to go home for lunch. And you went Monday through Saturday. So I did that for 3 years, and that solidified being in that situation. There were no alternative routes. You were either a subsistent farmer, or you got at least a middle school diploma and could work for an NGO, or you got a high school diploma and could move up in an NGO, non-governmental organization, or again, you were a subsistent farmer. So it just really hit home how critically important a good education is. The success of the citizens of any country is going to be based on education. And so that's kind of when it hit home that, I was pretty sure I was going to be a lifelong educator. Came back to the school where I did my student teaching, and I love McCallum. Has a very east-west cut of Austin. So it looks like a lot like Austin, very diverse, both ethnically and socioeconomically. And we have a big long hallway, north-south, kind of like I-35. So, like I said, I've been there 24 years. I've loved every minute of it. Again, it's a 4A school. So I'm sorry, we're now a 5A school, but we've got 1,700 kids. So there's enough kids that there's a lot of things and opportunities. And there are not too many kids so that, you get lost in the crowd. Like some of the schools can go, 2,200, 2,500 or whatever. That's kind of what my graduating class was 585. And, I don't know everybody. Our graduating classes are usually about 380, 385.
That's so foreign, man, to John and I, because John and I come from a very small town. And that's one of the dynamics that we'll get into with this. But John and I think probably had graduating classes somewhere in between kind of 50 to maybe the high 60s.
Sure.
49, class of 98, 49.
Nice. Our kids are at 5A Division I and 6A Division I schools. I think Lauren's class next year is something like 3,400, if I'm not mistaken. It's insane, man.
That is insane.
Hey,
that is insane.
Hey, Richard, when you kind of, you said when you said you were teaching kids with nothing more than really, a piece of wood painted black or a chalkboard, that kind of, I hear something like that, and then, I hear sometimes how we're not spending enough money in our school system, and so, can you kind of talk to where you see, problems that pre-exist, like pre-COVID, where some of the problems were? Is it a money issue when it comes to some of the things that are broken in our educational system? Because I think if you talk to most people around the country, most people will agree that there are problems with our educational system. Is it really a matter of money? Because we spend a lot of money on our educational system. So I hear you talk about teaching kids with nothing more than a piece of wood painted black, and how much money we already throw at our educational system here in this country, and we still have all these problems. So from your perspective, what are some of the problems that were pre-COVID, and is it a money issue, or is it more of a structural
Sure.
issue?
Well, so what's tricky? Sure. What's tricky about the money thing, and a lot of people don't recognize that 80% of the budget goes to personnel. So it takes just an enormous number of people to run a school, and you're salarying them and you're giving them benefits, and kind of one of the things that makes education difficult is an enormous number of our teachers are women of childbearing age, right? And so for health insurance, that's a huge cost because of that fact.
Yeah.
And so that is a cost that cannot be, it is what it is. So that's where a lot of the salary goes. Now, I do think Austin AISD and big school districts do struggle with, some of the admin costs, right? There are people that are in charge of people that are in charge of people that are in charge of people. And
just about to ask you that.
Yeah. And that is a major concern. And I do feel like sometimes these people do things that, don't help, right? But some agency somewhere wants a report on this, and so they have to have these people to create these reports.
Yeah.
That say, have you been counting the number of plastic forks that you've been using? Well, we need to know those numbers, and so, well, you better get on, that kind of thing. So it is, there are some struggles, as a teacher, quote, in the trenches, as opposed to people downtown.
Yeah.
Who, I'm not really sure what everyone's doing. Now, could I cut it in half? No, I don't think so. But, there is some struggles with that.
Yeah.
But here's one of the things that, especially in Austin, Austin is particularly tricky because of the whole Robin Hood we have to give an enormous amount of money back to the state because Austin is an expensive place to live. And because it's expensive to pay a fair wage, to pay health insurance, it takes more money, and the state takes a lot of that away. I think what our 22-23% of our budget goes back to the state because of the Robin Hood.
That's insane, man.
What purpose is that going back to the state? Like what are they doing with that money, and what quote unquote like line item is that quote unquote that's shaved that off?
It's basically allowing the state to pay for less. So they have certain financial obligations to every district in the state. And when they bring in money from Austin, they can redirect that money to rural and other urban school districts that don't have, that don't hit the Robin Hood, so that they don't have to pay for it.
Okay, so it's kind of like football being the sport that funds golf.
Yes,
sort of thing.
That is exactly right. And so that's what makes it tricky for Austin, is the fact that we have such a high percent of low socioeconomical kids that we have to support, make lunches for and buy hotspots for and all that sorts of stuff. And yet that money goes out the window back to the state so they don't have to pay for stuff. So Austin is a little unique in that sense. But like, for instance, we have, the copiers in our school are 10 years old. They're lower grade. They break often. So, we burn a bunch of time fighting the copiers, waiting for them to get repaired, coming back later. So that's a loss of time. The district has been very good about trying to get devices to every high school student. But as a result, the Chromebooks that they buy have to be much lower cost. They're much less reliable. They have to be fixed or repaired or, whatever. And so, once again, you're talking about people that have to do that. You have to have a lot of technicians to keep the technology rolling. And AISD is pretty dedicated to its technology. And for the most part, I think it's been good. I think every once in a while, somebody downtown reads an article and goes, "Oh, we need that." Like about 15 years ago, distance learning became a big thing. And so they put all these fancy distance learning classrooms in each of the schools, and they were like 85 grand a pop. And, so this school had a really cool class. And so they wanted other schools to kind of be able to join in. Well, once again, you have to get those kids to that classroom, and you have to have a teacher to supervise them. And that kids, but there's only 11 kids that want to take that. And there's a classroom over here that has 24. And so it became, no one thought that through. If you had talked to the teachers, we could have shot holes in it. But a lot of times we're so busy teaching, it's hard to give advice to an admin who, once again, tries to make big decisions. And Austin's very tricky because it's so diverse.
Right.
And I kind of want to touch on the admin side of things, because now with COVID going on, even before trying to make a decision that would filter down into a school has to go through so many different layers of administration. Yes. And now with COVID going on, I think that problem is probably
amplified,
right? So, and I think, and this is kind of where I was talking about, the nature of the system that's set up itself almost inhibits any kind of positive structural change to happen, whether we're in a crisis situation or we're not in a crisis situation. We're kind of finding ourselves in a crisis situation.
Right.
And so, right now everybody's trying to find a one size fits all approach,
which is
kind of like they did before COVID with the educational system. And, it wasn't really working back then. And now they're kind of going with the same approach now. And, I don't know how teachers feel about that. pre-COVID and especially now, it's just, I know you guys are kind of doing what you guys have to do, obviously, because it's all that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, when COVID hit, it was, you know, we were all completely unprepared, and it was survival mode. You know, especially because McCallum has a big, wide cut. You know, we have kids that had no internet, no hotspot, and so they had to take school buses and load it with equipment and drive it into neighborhoods to try to get some Wi-Fi for these kids. And you know, the kids, Zoom takes some bandwidth to work well, right? You know, to see them, to understand them, for them to respond and all that sorts of stuff. And the hotspots, you know, because they deliver a hotspot, and well, there's actually 3 kids living there. And so 3 kids on one hotspot, you know, it's tricky. And also, you know, a big thing with my students is, you know, mom or dad was in the restaurant business, and you know, that went out the window, and so they had to go to work. You know, I had a lot of my students headed to HEB or a grocery store to work, or worked with uncle's fencing, you know, all of the kind of the landscaping and fencing, all that sorts of stuff. People have been sitting home staring out at their yard going, you know what, we should do something. So, you know, they're going gangbusters. And so therefore, you know, it's a place to earn money. You know, I got 1 or 2 emails a week saying, sorry, Mr. Coles, I'm busy helping my uncle or my dad or whatever, or, you know, the towing business is picked up. So I've got to go help with that. And so I can't join your synchronous. I mean, I held quite a few synchronous sessions, right? So I know the importance of looking at the kids and giving a structure to them and say, let's talk about this, let me explain this, and then you can practice on your own. Some teachers weren't prepared for that, and, you know, kind of posted a video and kind of let them do mostly asynchronous. But, you know, I wanted to do that. And, you know, a lot of my kids who wanted to make it, you know, couldn't. And so it really is amplifying a lot of the divides that already existed. You know, I often say, you know, sometimes my kids' lives are so loud they can't hear what's going on in the classroom, and this makes it, you know, like that. And you know, I have students that I am concerned about because of their home situations. You know, they've got a family member that is, you know, struggling for whatever reason, and home is not a great place for them. They like to come to school. There's structure. It's calm. There's food. And, you know, they're stuck at home in a tricky situation. And so, you know,
and friends.
Yes.
Social aspect.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, there's kids at our school that come for, you know, 2 meals a day and friendship. And that's the main reason why they're there.
Right. So they did the synchronous asynchronous thing here as well, and it depended on the teacher. And so my wife is a teacher, and so her desk, I set her up in the office right across from me here, and she was having to try to do those things. And I told this story before, but I'll briefly tell it. She was trying to, and she's 4th, 5th grade math science, and so she's trying to teach these kids, and these kids are. Largely they're listening, they're getting on. It's a little rough at first, getting them into using Schoology and all that sort of stuff, right? Once they get into the flow, it's not just that, it's now this one kid is there that is trying to listen and she's trying to understand, but the environment around her, you know, siblings running around yelling, and the dad's yelling at some other kid or whoever it was in the house like that. And that all is happening on the mic, and all the kids are distracted. And if the camera's on, people walking behind them and all, like, it's a very difficult thing to do that sort of synchronous learning like that. And then the async side, my son was doing that, where he would just take Google Classroom stuff. He's 15. And so he would just take Google Classroom and he just get it all done Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and a 4-day weekend with no real face-to-face. But during COVID, there was a lessened, not as difficult of a lesson, let's say. It wasn't as rigorous, right? And so my fear with asynchronous now is giving him lessons and saying, here, learn this and submit homework or here's a video, watch it, and maybe ask questions in a chat, may prove a little bit difficult in 2020 for him, this being his first year in high school. So it is an interesting thing. And I think you're right that the disparities are starting to show up in the communities that these schools are servicing right now.
Right. I mean, ideally we stop time and we say, okay, AT&T, you got this, Google, you got this, Grande, you got this, go lay some cable so we can get some decent internet to these folks. No time elapse, it's got to get in there, and then you could kind of maybe improve it from there. But, it's really, really tricky. And there's not even places where we can, it's not like we can walk them down to the library, and set them up there, because the library can't accommodate all the kids that need it, or community centers, or, places like, Dove Spring Community Center, set them up and, get a big heavy Wi-Fi and kind of get them so they can kind of see each other, but still be productive. It's tricky. I think this is really emphasized how much, and that's kind of one of the things that's always been important to me, how much schools are a community, right? It's that attachment, not only of the students to each other, but students to teachers, and teachers with teachers. It really is an important cohesive community that is really in a lot of pain and suffering because of this. And that's really the hardest thing. What do you call it? American Pediatric Association came out and said, we've got to figure out how to get these kids back to school, because mentally that's where they are. I had 4 or 5 kids that were battling depression, during the year, and missed very little. And as soon as this happened, they all fell off the bandwagon. And
I was talking to my sister-in-law up in Boston, and their neighbor actually was a kid that battled depression. And really kind of over the last, year, 2 years, he started to really kind of associate more, come out of his shell. And it's gotten to the point now to where they have issues even getting him out of his room, because he's gotten so thrown off, and it, I can tell you, I mean, I grew up an only child, no brothers or sisters. When you get comfortable with yourself and with your thoughts and with your own mind, it's very easy to become insular, and shut the entire world off. And that is, one of the things that I had told John and Mike at the very beginning of this thing is I said, I wonder what the mental health fallout of this is going to be, because it is, it's compounded. I mean, we had some coaches on here a while back, and one of the things that we had on talking to them was, he said, Chris, he said, I had some of my kids that I couldn't even get a hold of, and come to find out they've changed phone numbers 1 to 2 times already during the pandemic. And he said, both of, I had a student whose both of the parents had lost their jobs. They were having issues just even putting food on the table. So the other aspect to that, in addition to the mental health, is the nutritional value of that too. Schools, I think, are doing a really good job filling that gap and trying to get kids hot meals. But the reality of that is, man, is that can only go so far before even that gets strained. And, there's so much. There was a police officer that parked outside of my house yesterday, because he patrols my neighborhood for Neighborhood Watch. And I was talking to him, and there's a group home that is inside of my subdivision towards the back. And he said, most of the calls we're getting right now in this entire area are kids in this group home who, their behavior has just become amplified because, they already come from, kind of encumbered backgrounds to begin with. And now it's just completely throwing them off. So, what are your thoughts on that in terms of, some of the kids that are already kind of borderline? Do you foresee, maybe some of those kids just completely falling out and, maybe not returning back to school?
Yeah, I'm very worried about that.
Yeah.
Very, very, very worried about that. Because those kids before COVID were clinging on with their fingernails to stay with them. And we, we teachers, reach out to them in person, because, those are the kids that are not, you can't, text them or call them or whatever. I mean, the best interactions are when you're face to face and you're saying, hey, I am here for you. I will help you however I can. What can I do for you today? How is your day going? And all that sort of stuff.
Correct me if I'm wrong, and I may be wrong, but there already existed a shortage of special ed teachers to begin with in the state of Texas. Am I correct there?
That is correct.
So, I mean, that's only going to amplify itself, and one of the things John and I were talking about, and Mike kind of hit on it too, but not only have the cracks started to show, but I mean, we're looking at complete crevices right now. And,
yes.
The education system is kind of split. And John and I were talking amongst each other the other day, and it was like, what's the possibility of maybe getting a teacher to come to the house and teach, or getting a tutor to come to the house and teach? And I think that is going to be a whole nother aspect to this thing, to where, parents are just going to say, you know what, we'll just homeschool our kids. We'll pay teachers to come, and we don't even have to worry with the school system. I think one of the other aspects to this thing that's going to happen is, if we, for some reason, don't have a vaccine, and we have rising cases and kids start getting sick, I think we're going to get to the point to where people are going to realize how much of a sham I think a lot of this standardized testing is. And I would not be surprised if we saw a real revolt towards it.
Yes, I completely agree. Standardized testing is really, 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 really tricky.
Yes.
Once again, as you pointed out, they try to do one size fits all, which is always just, a complete disaster, no matter who you are, whether it's industry or energy or whatever. One size fits all always blows up, no matter what you're trying to do. And so, that is a major issue. But, on the flip side, I get why something has to be there, because before standardized testing, there were places where they just weren't doing anything, like who was the famous football player from Oklahoma?
Just moving them across.
Yeah, it's just like, good football player, just move them on. And, there's going to be schools or teachers or admin or whatever that are going to condone that just because it's easier. I mean, I'm lucky that at McCallum, we fight very hard to try to educate every single kid as best that we can. But I know that there are
John
places...
and I have seen that situation firsthand, just passing kids through for a very, very long time, man. And it is,
absolutely.
And sadly, Richard, every single one of those individuals went on to, I wouldn't say fall through the cracks, because that doesn't really happen, in small country towns, but every single one of them ended up out of the education system and into the justice system.
Yep, no doubt.
It just happened, It just happened.
Because once again, there's that, sense of accountability, sense of community, and all that sorts of stuff. And they knew they were getting passed along, so they were already beginning to feel like outsiders. They were not being held accountable. They were not, when you give that structure and you set those expectations and all that sorts of stuff, it draws them in. Everybody wants to do well.
Yeah.
Everyone wants to do well. I mean, yes, there's acting out and all that sorts of stuff, but everyone wants to do well. And when you kind of pass them along, they're like, oh, well, I guess I'm not worth your effort. I'm not worth your time. I'm not a part of this community. You're just kind of moving me along. And so, as a result, like you said,
they don't see the value in actually learning if you just pass them along.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it takes a lot of, you have to learn the value of hard work along the way.
Right. You have to become a lifelong learner in order to be successful, because everything is a learning process. Marriage, kids, finances, all of that. Everything is a learning process, because everything is always changing. And, and if they don't learn how to learn and how they understand things, then that's the biggest detriment.
Let me, you brought up finances. Let me ask you, this is one of my biggest pet peeves with the educational system is they don't teach kids about money.
I know.
They don't teach kids about finance, money, like at a very young age. Like, honestly, it's my opinion that if you taught kids from a very young age the value of money, you could probably solve a lot of the problems in this country just with that knowledge alone. Because learning about money and learning about time value allows you to understand the value of so many other things as you're growing up.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's the one thing missing in our education system that it's almost like they don't do it on purpose for some reason, because it's like the one thing that they don't teach that you would think that is like the most important thing to teach. One of the most important things to teach growing up. Right.
The thing you need for your entire life. They don't teach
for your
you.
entire life, how to properly manage money, what money is, how it works.
And the kids want to know. And the kids want to know. So in addition to my math classes, I also run the PALS program, which is peer assisted leadership, and it's an elective. And I take students from all across the school, and we mentor kids in feeder schools. And so to help build the community, I have a box of questions. And one of the questions is always, what is not taught in school that you would want? And without a doubt, one of the first things that's repeated over and over is finances. They want to know about finances, and they also really, really want to be given straight up information on how to make decisions about alcohol, drugs, sexual relationships, all of that. They are dying to know that information. And, whether it's, parents afraid, or whether it's too controversial an issue to be taught in school or whatever, the kids are dying to get good information about that. And it's just not anywhere. And again, I don't know if finances is just because it's tricky. I mean, it can't be any trickier than sex education, but I really don't know, and it is a shame, because one of the things that I do with new teachers at McCallum is I sit down and talk finances with them. I'm like, how much are you putting towards retirement? Like, retirement? I just started. I'm like, exactly.
And that's something that if they were taught at an early age, they'd already had an answer for you, by the time they're coming to you and they're a teacher and you're having that conversation, right? So you were blessed because you had your parents, and I know your parents taught you very well.
A related story to that, Mike, was I was just telling you guys, I was talking to my niece about 401k. And she's in her early 20s. And I was asking her, do you know about 401k? She has twins. And so I was like, do you know about 529s and these sort of things? And so I started breaking down. She didn't know. So I started breaking down our 401k. Real simple examples, pre-tax, post-tax sort of stuff. And she was just like, okay, I'm mind blown. Why didn't they teach us this in school?
Right.
And I was like, yes, like I can't answer that for you, but yes, they failed to provide that information.
Right, because there's lots of stuff out there. I mean, we have the You Promise credit card, and 1% of all of our purchases goes towards a 529 for my kids. And if you buy through certain websites, you get a certain percent. I've got $11,000 of free money from a 529 just by using that credit card and buying through websites. Gap has a sale, and 2% of your purchase goes into that 529 and all that sorts of stuff. And it's just like all these opportunities are out there, and I'm like, oh my gosh.
Well, and now especially with COVID going on, this is a severe negative shock to people's finances now more than ever.
Right.
Kids need to be learning this stuff. I mean, because they're going to be, they were already going to be behind the curve. Now they're going to be like 10 times behind the curve. If you don't start teaching this stuff now, given what's going on with COVID, how it's affecting the economy, how it's going to affect our parents and their incomes. So it's like,
yeah, and it's affecting, not only that, but, with the taxes going in the tank, it also means the school districts have less money and the state has less money. I mean, this next legislature is going to be a mess because there is no money to be spread around. And so, you know, when people and institutions need more money, you know, the taxes isn't flowing. And so it's really kind of a perfect storm as far as there's going to be a lot of stress and discomfort for all of us for a while.
How do you think this is going to affect college level education? Because I mean, we just got done talking about how everything's going to be affected from, you know, the primary school all the way through high school. I think my personal opinion is that I think you're going to start to see a shift away from college level education where, I mean, before, you know, the system was structured in a way where, I mean, you almost had to have a college education in order to get a decent job. Like that somewhere along the line, I don't remember what year it was or what decade it was, but the whole system kind of shifted towards that, where you had to go to college to get a good job. You had to go into debt, which is why we got $1 trillion in student loan debt. And so, you know, we got that problem that we're dealing with right now. So do you see a shift away from that, especially now how COVID's going to affect education from, from these lower levels all the way up to, you know, whether or not kids are going to go to college or they stay home and work with their parents more and learn like on the job type training and do more trade stuff?
So first, let me back up a little bit and say, you know, one of the biggest travesties is that too much money shifted away from trade stuff, right? That should have not been completely abandoned like it was. And that's kind of one of my, you know, if I were, you know, Sultan of Education, I'm never on the ballot, but if I were Sultan of Education, right, I would make trade something significant, because we have a lot of kids that feel lost because there is no guidance towards, hey, you know what, it's okay that you don't like to, that you don't want to learn, pre-calculus. But, I noticed that, you really are good with people and we need to get you in, this trade, or, everyone is dying to get, good repair people and all that sorts of stuff. And that's just a shame. But you're right. So as things have pushed towards more college, college has gotten more competitive, therefore high school has gotten more competitive. And therefore, why we're struggling a lot more with like mental health stuff. You have between the helicopter parenting, which takes away a lot of the independence of the student, the more competitive trying to get into college, which adds the stress. And then, with the whole social media thing, they're having to live multiple lives, not only their in-person life, but their online life. And so all of that has really come crashing down. It's taken its mental toll on our students. And so I think there's going to be a lot of gap years. I think there's going to be a lot of folks that are going to delay going to school. I think big universities, are going to struggle for a little bit. And I think ACC is going to see uptick in enrollment and all that sorts of stuff. Hey, I'm just going to spend this year and take a couple classes at ACC and then see what happens and see if things clear up, because, I think that's legit. If my daughter gets into some, private school that costs however much money, I don't know if I want to pay for that, for her to do that online. That's a legit thing. I think I'm lucky in some sense that, my daughter's entering high school and that's still years away. But I think there's going to be a lot of limbo years where folks are doing some ACC dabbling, maybe working for a while, I'm just going to work for a while until this kind of blows over. I know there's a lot of gap year. Some of the gap year groups that organize things said that there's a big uptick in interest in applications. So I think that's what people are going to do. I mean, I think they're going to take 1 or 2 classes at ACC, work for a while, and then kind of when things kind of simmer down, it'll go back. But, you know, in the meantime, I think, you know, universities are going to be hating it, because I think that there's going to be students that aren't going to come back. They're going to wait till things chill out. And they have no source of revenue like sports. You know, that is a huge source of revenue.
Yeah, we talked about that on.
So I think it's going to be tough for universities for a couple of years.
Yeah, my daughter, quick background real quick, Mike. So my daughter's in college, Richard, and this is going to be her 2nd year. And so I've been following up with her on, hey, babe, what do you want to do? Do you want to go for the 2nd year, or are you going to do all online? Are you trying to go into class? And what are they trying to charge? Obviously, I'm worried about that aspect.
Yep.
And, you know, so I've noticed that there's been a little bit of consternation from the students, because they're seeing, you know, like these, there's an online, it's like a trip charge or something. Like if you're doing all online, they have a little fee, but then, you know, there's other rules, like for freshmen, you have to be on campus, right? So you have to have a dorm and a meal plan and all this. And so that whole system is being flipped completely on its head. And so it's going to be interesting to see how this all, you know, how it all shapes out, because this is definitely uncharted.
Yeah, and I don't think anyone's going to be immune. I think the small schools and the big schools are all going to struggle. You know, that's kind of with some of the AP scores. You know, some schools only take 4s and 5s, and a lot of that's economic. I think, you know, it's like those freshman classes are cash cows, right? You got a bunch of kids in there, even at small universities. You got a bunch of kids in there with one teacher, right? And they're paying, you know, and all that sorts of stuff. And so, you know, you don't want too many people skipping out of those big intro classes. So that's kind of why a lot of small schools take higher scores. You know, they kind of say, oh, because we are more demanding, and I'm not convinced on that. But you know, it's economic thing, and I think that's also motivating some of these places to cut sports, because of the fact that it is a major expense that they need to get rid of until things, you know, find some more normalcy.
Man, that's a whole nother subject. You know, we've been having Zoom calls with a lot of the coaches, and I'll tell you, man, one of the as far back as, what was it, John? April, if I'm not mistaken. You and Mike was on the call actually for the very first one, and I want to say that it was at the very beginning of April, and he told us flat out that he didn't expect there to be any sports whatsoever. I think, you know, too, what's going to end up happening is it's going to end up pushing a lot of those costs and things like that on parents for transportation. You know, I think schools are going to probably try to limit some of that liability, not only from the COVID aspect of it, but like you said, because they're going to have to cut some of the budgeting out of it. So at what point do some of those kids just say, well, we'll just go play select ball, you know? And really and truly, I don't think that that's a bad idea, because right now, I think the main focus should really be getting these kids back in school and getting them integrated back in, because we have basically missed from the time they went to spring break to now, pretty much a whole year.
Yep.
You know, it's unprecedented, man. And the other aspect of that too is, I feel bad for you guys, man, because y'all are going to have hell trying to keep attention spans. It's going to be hard, man.
It is. You know, I, like, as an AP teacher, I get feedback every year because I have my AP scores, right? And you know, I'm lucky. I've been doing it since 2001, and I've had great success. But I was looking at my scores, and you know, I with each kid, I give a range of scores what I think they're going to get, right? You know, I think they'll get somewhere between a 2 and a 3, or a 3 and a 4, or 4 and a 5, or whatever. And my kids, almost all the kids that slid down were significantly less engaged in the electronic, thing than the kids that went up. All my kids that slid up were there every time I did a review, would come to extra review sessions because we were required to have office hours outside of the synchronous class times. And it was an engagement. The kids that were engaged were successful. The kids, and some of these kids were, great kids. I mean, they made A's and B's, and they got a 2 on the AP exam because they checked out. This wasn't working for them, and maybe they lost interest and decided, oh well, I was kind of on the fence about taking the AP exam anyway. That may have, or something. But
that's what I don't like about. So my niece is at UTSA right now, and she struggled every single year to pass the STAR test, but she carried almost a 99 GPA in high school. Yep. So she had to go to summer school her senior year to graduate just so she wouldn't lose her scholarship, right? She got a 50% scholarship. Nice. She gets to UTSA, she makes Dean's List, perfect 4.0. Yep. When I was coming out of high school, we had the TIES test, I think it was.
Yep.
And I would purposely, gear myself more towards, kind of writing intensive and kind of, classes where you really had to do a lot of, talking and things like that, presenting, because that was just a strong suit for me. When I got into college, it was kind of the same thing. I went and took the LSAT to get into law school. I did well on that. Some of us, it's the opposite, right? We test really, really well, but yep. All of the other junk, I do not do well with it, man. Yep. the multiple choice math questions and all that, I suck at it. But, yep. When it comes to the standardized testing and things like that, man, I've always been able to do well. My wife's the complete opposite. She's like you. She's a math. I've seen her, man, get into Excel and make numbers do backflips. It's unbelievable.
Nice. Yeah,
that's because Julie's a rock star.
Well, she is. I just live here, like I said.
Yeah, I'm a slow and meticulous person. I never, ever saw the last question on any section of the SAT or PSAT or anything like that. I'm just not, like I said, I'm slow and meticulous. And, I was at a high-powered, Bel Air High School was a high-powered high school. And same thing, I didn't finish tests very often. And, so the test didn't necessarily reflect what I learned because I never finished them. And, at my high school, that bell rang, you turned it in and you were done. There was no, and so my students are always blown away, like, Mr. Coles, you're always so nice about letting us come and finish. And I'm like, well, because I want to see what you know. There are a couple students who, go and kind of look stuff up and, and all that kind of thing. But for the most part, people underestimate students. They underestimate the fact that they can tell whether a teacher is there for them or not. And my students quickly pick up that I am there I have their best interest at heart, and I am trying to make them successful. And they respect that and they honor that. And I really have very few issues with kids doing stupid stuff, trying to cheat or, and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, we haven't even talked about the other aspect of how many teachers out there are really not there for the best interest of the kids, and how many are there just to collect a paycheck and get through the day, and they're not going to put in that extra work and all that stuff. So there's that whole other side of the coin. Richard, I wanted to ask you just kind of while we're closing things down, what would your best advice be to parents who are figuring out how to get through this next semester?
Good question.
And with all the changes that are going to end up happening, and like as far as how to cope with at home learning, and
sure,
how to stay in contact with the teacher, and just the stress levels and all that stuff, because you're a parent too, so you got 3 kids, so you're dealing with that yourself from the parent side. So what's your best advice to parents
Sure.
And do you see, just from how to cope with everything, and more along the lines of, like we were talking about earlier, do you think there's more value going forward in focusing your kids towards trade schools if you think that there's value there for your kid, versus pushing them so much towards college education? Like, I know it's going to be different for every parent and every kid, but
Right.
maybe start thinking about things like that.
Sure. So so there's a bunch of things that you've asked. So let me first start off with, in my experience in education, what students crave and thrive on is structure, and encouragement. So I think even if it's asynchronous, I think you've got to say, okay, math is at this time, English is at this time, we're going to do this, and then we're going to take a break, and then we're going to, I think you've got to try to create as much structure and to-do lists and all that as you can for your student. Because if it's willy-nilly, they're going to fall apart. They're going to get sucked into YouTube or get sucked into something else. You've got to provide that structure as best that you can. Whether it's, calling them at home, if you're at work, try to call them, once an hour. I'm like, all right, are you done with math? Are you, all blah, blah, oh, sorry. They need that focus and that encouragement. Hey, I appreciate that you're working on that. I'm so glad that that's done. I think you're doing a good job. It's okay for you to be frustrated, and reach out to the teachers. I mean, most of us in education crave that interaction with our students, and our students don't always feel comfortable interacting with the teachers. And so that's kind of where the parent comes in. Say, hey, email your teacher, find out, if that didn't make sense, when's their office hour, when's a good time to go get help and all that sorts of stuff. Because, a lot of my students did not take advantage of office hours. I spent a lot of time in office hours in my study here, just, putzing with other things or helping my own kids. I mean, my kids knew when my office hours were, and they could knock and, and get help or all that sorts of stuff. But, especially with my 10-year-olds, right? My fourth graders that are now going to be fifth graders, they needed that structure to say, this is when you're going to do this, this is when you're going to do this. And they did better with that. And, and again, just saying, hey, good job. I'm so glad that you got that done. Even though it was less quantity because we were on survival mode, telling them, this is when you're going to do this, and this is when this has got to get done. That's what they crave and that's what they need. So I think that's really, structure. Never be afraid to reach out to the teachers, because I think most of the teachers are going to want to support you. And as far as the, I think whatever path you're headed towards is what you need to stay with. I think you've got to be prepared for, like I said, a gap year, or maybe you're going to have to take something during summer school later, that, that kind of thing. Like the ACC, I mean, I think that's a good gig, right? It's reasonably cost. You're going to get learn some good stuff. So I don't think I would necessarily veer towards a different path, but I do think that parents underestimate trade. Education certainly has underestimated trade. The trade school in Waco is superior, and their students get awesome jobs all over. And
what trade school is that?
I'm trying to think. It's in Waco. It's Texas State. Drat. I'm sorry that I don't remember it, but it's in Waco, and they have a stellar reputation. And it's all like
Texas State Technical College.
There you go. Thank you, sir. It is, they have like diesel engine stuff, and they have air conditioning stuff. I had a special ed kid who became attached with me, during his year, and he comes back once a year to keep me updated. And man, he got that trade school AC stuff, and he uses it, right? You know, he's a hardworking kid. You know, if you're hardworking and are trained well, you are desirable. And I think people underestimate that, no doubt.
Yeah, I was gonna kind of just to piggyback off of what you said as far as keeping keeping in contact with the teacher. You know, this last semester when COVID hit, and you know, we found ourselves with our kids at home, and we're looking a lot more at, now you're kind of becoming the teacher in a lot of ways, right? Because the teacher's not there and kids are asking you. And I remember looking at some of my kids' work, and I'm like, I don't even know what they're asking in this problem. Like, yeah, I'm sitting there like, I'm 38 years old, and I don't understand what it is this problem is even asking. Like the way that they teach these days is so different compared to when we were kids, just simple things.
Yeah.
And so I'm sitting there like, how am I even supposed to help you right now when I don't even understand what this material is asking and the way it's worded and how they're even teaching it? And I'm like, oh my God, like it's frustrating on the parent side too.
Oh, no doubt. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, but also you have to understand is some of that stuff is, you know, the kids are used to it because they've seen it all year. You know, we scaffold, the students adapt to the scaffolding of the teacher. And as parents, you know, you haven't been there all that time. And so you haven't been a part of that scaffolding. You know, like when my former students from geometry come up and say, can you help me with pre-cal? I'm like, only if you bring your textbook, because I haven't taught pre-cal. I haven't taken pre-cal since I was 17. And I don't
geometry
nuances and stuff like that. You know, and I'm a math teacher now. They bring me the book and I can say, oh, okay. I you know, so don't underestimate your sense of frustration is legit because of the fact that, you know, you're not in that classroom. You know, I teach stats and geometry, but that doesn't mean I can teach long division. You know, I don't remember all the intricacies of that. And that's kind of why we specialize, right? Is because this makes sense.
Done things over the years.
And then all that sorts of stuff. So I think your frustration is very real, but I don't misunderstand, you know, where your frustration is coming from. You know, it's really only the teacher really knows kind of what they're feeding the student. You know, anybody else, you know, you could not put me in front of a bunch of fourth graders and have me to do a successful lesson. You know, you say, all right, I want you to teach this. And I'd walk into a class of fourth graders and
but isn't that a problem in and of itself, where if you're teaching something to a fourth grader and the parent can't even understand what it is that you're teaching the fourth grader, that's a problem. Like, I mean, if you're making it so complicated, and I'm not talking about, I mean, obviously, you know, adults, we data dump so much stuff that we learned when we were kids, but like, it just seems like the way that they structure how they're teaching these concepts and ideas is like, you know, if an adult can't pick up on it without having the matrix that a teacher has, you know, the secret sauce matrix that the teacher apparently has to understand it, then it's just all I'm saying is it's a stress and it's a struggle that parents are going to have to go through as we're teaching at home. So I guess, you know, just keep in contact with the teacher as much as you can.
I agree, but also understand that part of what has changed a little bit about education is it's less rote and more discovery. Certainly it's gonna shift from teacher to teacher. So, you know, as we try to get them to discover things, you know, that's not kind of how we learned it. And, you know, you're having to kind of discover it alongside of them. And that's better for their brain and their problem solving and their long-term thinking. Because, you know, I do that all the time in my stats class. You know, I say, okay, here's the thing. I want you to come up with a formula. I'm going to give you 10 minutes, go. And they're like, but can't you just tell us the formula? I said, I could, but I don't want to do that. I want you to try to figure it out on their own. And they're, you know, some of the kids are always like, oh, I hate these days. I'm like, I love these days. And, you know, and as a result, it's always interesting because some of your top scoring kids struggle with the discovery. They don't like to figure things out. They just want to be given everything and then they can reproduce it. And to me, that's, you know, that's not helpful, you know, and so as a result, I think it makes us parents uncomfortable because we don't know kind of what they're building, right? Because you're kind of leading them along this year-long path towards some end skills, and it's hard, you know, it's hard to kind of jump in the middle of a path and know which way you're going and what you're doing and all that sorts of stuff. So
yeah, that was to Mike's point is my son is very like structured and rigid. So if the teacher told you do it this way, that's the way it needs to be done. So he would bring work home and I'd be like, oh yeah, here's 2, 3, 4 ways to finish this math problem. And he'd be like, no, that's not how we're supposed to do it. And I'm like, no, but you can do it. He's like, no, that's not how she wants us to do it, you know?
Yep.
And so that was always interesting.
Yeah, I had the Algebra 1 teacher that my daughter had this past year, and I did not see eye to eye because she was very much of that way. You need to do it this way, and this is the right way. And there were times that my daughter doesn't think that way. She's much more visual like I am. And she's trying to do this multi-step rote process. And I'm just like, okay, don't think of it like that. Think of it as a flow, right? It's an obstacle course and you're just kind of going, but she said that this is the only path. I'm like, well, it's not. And to me, that's the beauty of mathematics, right? Is that it's just so many different ways to figure things out. And you have to honor those different ways with your students, because there are a lot of students that are convinced that they're not good math students because they don't get the one way. And I think that is a tragedy. It is a sin. So many of us are good mathematical thinkers. They just need to be encouraged and recognize that they think of it differently.
I'm in that category. I'm just not a math fan, and I've never really been a math fan. But at the same time, I'm a very strong critical thinker, and I can use logic and reason, you know, very well to deduce things. I just never, to me, it could never really click in terms of how to make it work with numbers. And It's funny to say that because my wife Julie's the complete opposite. You know, when I see what she can do with numbers and the way she can just make them flip, she's phenomenal with it. My sister-in-law's kind of the same way, but they don't like to do a lot of reading, public speaking, things like that. So, you know, there's a certain dynamic to it. And I think a lot of that is, you know, kind of acquired, not even acquired skill. Some of it's just natural skill, but I never really knew how to, blend the two to make it work. But man, I mean, my kids, like I look at my son and I look at my daughter, they're both pretty good, strong math students. But what we do here at the house is, you know, to kind of amplify that is I put them in front of a camera and I'll interview them, you know, and make them practice their you know, camera skills, their speaking skills and things like that. And they do really well with it. And I think that helps a lot of that click, because really and truly it's really two sides of the same coin, if you want to be, you know, blatant about it.
Right.
Absolutely.
Again, as Sultan of Education, I think the major pathway and focus is on calculus, and I think that's a mistake. It really should be on statistics because it is an integrated math application. There's the communication piece as well as the number piece.
Yes.
And you don't have to, you know, solve for X, but like 4 times in my class. And so I have a lot of students like you that are excellent communicators and critical thinkers that love statistics, because that's what it is. You know, we're not worried about the number because the calculator gave me the number. Yes. What does it mean? How did you get it? What kind of data did you collect and all that sorts of stuff? And stats is a lot more applicable and interesting and fun than a lot of, you know, pre-calculus. I mean, you know, don't get me wrong, those are important courses for future engineers and all that sorts of stuff. But I really think intro stats should be a required course in high school. But that's, like I said, if I were Sultan.
Well, if any of us are ever president, we will keep your name at the top of the list for Sultan of education.
Yeah, man.
100%.
Sounds like a plan.
Man, this is awesome. I was telling some cousin the other day, talking to him about that aspect of, we teach these classes that aren't necessarily required for someone that's going into different fields. Me as a programmer, I needed calculus, right? I needed to learn how to think through those things. But my son is a musician. He's really good, and he's going to be rocking a bass more than he's going to be solving formulas. So he doesn't need that. So I think there's a lot of things that we could possibly see out of this. I'm looking forward to kind of seeing how things restructure. But I want to thank you, Richard, for joining us, man. This has been a great conversation. It's been really fun. I always like talking to fellow math nerds, so best of luck this year to Thanks. You and to all of the teachers. It's not going to be easy.
No, it's not. I'm a pretty healthy guy, so I'm less worried about it than some. But it's going to be really tricky. I'm going to have to probably log a lot of hours this year just to try to handle it all. Because I'm going to have kids that are going to be online and maybe kids at school, and it's going to be tricky.
Right.
Do the best that we can. It's been a pleasure.
Well, hey man, given the pedigree that you gave at the beginning of the show, I know you hear, veterans get thanked for their service, man. You hear firefighters, you hear police officers, you hear nurses and doctors, but that pedigree, man, thanks for you and your family's service, because that is a dedication, to the public, and that has affected decades of kids, man. So we will, you have an open invite, man, whenever you want to come back. If you want to bring someone else on from administration, et cetera, to talk, one of the things that, and if you haven't kind of seen it here, but man, one of the things that I think we do very strongly is we provide a platform for individuals that we consider, to be experts and professionals in their field, to really get on and give us an unfiltered version of, what it is that you do, why you do it, and how, we as, not only political commentators, but as the public as well, can do our job, to become better at whatever topic it is that we're speaking on. And I think, right now, with as convoluted as the world has become, we need true dialogue like this to be able to move the needle forward, because our political leaders on both state, local and federal levels have truly failed us. And it's going to be up to us to move the needle, man, especially for guys like you that are on the front line. So thanks, Richard, man, for what you do. And like I said, whenever you want to come back, man, you have an open invite.
Thank you. It's been a lot of fun. I have enjoyed this. We'll have to pencil in sometime after school begins, and I'll let you know how things go.
Good luck with that, right? Hey, stay for the post show though, for sure.
I'm sure you'll have plenty of time.
All right, sounds good. Show.
Absolutely. So we are the Political Free Agents. We do this every Wednesday, 7 p.m. and Sunday, 2 p.m. You can catch us at politicalfreeagents.com and at PFA Podcast on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. If you are watching us on YouTube, hit the like and subscribe button somewhere around here. And that way you'll get notified when we go live. Also subscribe to those social medias, and we post out every time we go live as well. But we will catch you on Sunday, and we are out. All right, post show still live on YouTube.
Richard, I've told, I don't know how many people I've told, but if this country looked at teachers and doctors and firefighters the same way they looked at professional sports players, we would be like, we'd probably be colonizing Mars.
Yep.
I mean, it's just a matter of, it's a matter of, focus. Where do we focus value? in America or just in society really these days. And you know, I just really think that we need to shift our focus towards what's more important. Hopefully COVID, you know, gives us a swift kick in the ass, and we were kind of forced to do that, hopefully, or at least start the process. But yeah, because I know you're in it for the money, but it's it takes a lot of dedication and
yeah, absolutely,
and hard work.
There are lots of long hours and lots of, you know, hoops that TEA throws at us, and you know TEA throws the hoop at the district, and the district then throws the smaller hoop at, you know, the principal, and they throw a smaller hoop at us and all that sorts of stuff. So we're kind of squeezing through at times. But you know, I'm really lucky that, you know, I see my former students from time to time. You know, I'm in touch with some of them on LinkedIn. At the end of the year, I have a journal, and I let them write me notes. And you know, it's a perk to have touched so many lives. You know, my students don't talk about the geometry and the stats, right? You know, they talk about the support and the kindness and the belief that I've instilled in them. You know, I tell them, I says, you know, define success. You know, you need two people to believe in you. I believe in you, and now you need to believe in yourself. And you know, and that opportunity is just invaluable. And again, and so critical. You know, those years in Africa, seeing, you know, where there is no escape. You know, you will grow what you will eat for the rest of your lives. You know, it's just like education is just so essential. And I think the countries that do well tend to have more focus, more respect, more support for the education system. And you're right. Unfortunately, it's too much show me the money here, and love of money and flash and all that sorts of stuff. I mean, you know,
that's what I was going to say, Mike. It goes back to the money. Where we place the value is on the dollar, and the profit that you can gain from selling a jersey or tickets or beer at a stadium is higher than what you can gain from educating kids, you know, in the micro sense. If you look over the course of time, you know, all the big companies that are created today, they came from education. So technically you could think of that as like the sports figures making millions of dollars. Those super billionaires came up through an educational system. And so the educational system technically generated that money. It's just, we have a detachment from that. And so it's interesting. Key and Peele did a skit where they were doing the teacher draft.
Yeah.
And did you see that one? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's hilarious because they treat teachers like they were athletes, and they're like, you know, yeah, such as I'm taking my talents down to, you know, whatever the school number in
exactly.
New York was.
PS 132. And
yeah. And the athletes, it was like, yeah, his dad was a you know, hardworking athlete, you know, barely getting by and that sort of thing, you know. So it was an interesting flip, but I don't think we'll ever see it because of, you know, Mike can definitely speak on it a lot more than I can. The way the financial system is set up is geared towards that profit dollar, not value.
It's geared towards debt.
Right.
And debt is a destructive force that, I mean, it can be used in a positive way, but the way the system is currently structured on debt is it has a very destructive nature to it. So, you know, unfortunately, you know, I think you're right, but
and it's times like this is when it really highlights how poorly, you know, that is because, you know, all of a sudden money dries up, and, you know, all you have are debt, and there's nothing flowing, and it makes things just so tricky.
Absolutely. Fellas, I'm gonna head over there so I can drop off your graphic, your wall art.
Oh, you coming over right now?
Yeah, I'm gonna swing by just to drop it off, a drop and run.
You just want to come see my face.
Man, I gotta come slap your cheeks a little bit.
Man, bro.
There's my MVP back there.
Who? Oh my God.
MVP. Wait, Chris, hold on. Chris, your face looks like hers a little bit now.
Man,
now you know where she gets it.
Yeah, we're practically twins. This is my Richard, this is my daughter right here, Lauren. This is the math
Superstar.
whiz and the athlete, right, La? Are you the math whiz? I thought you were good at math. You told me you were good at math. You're good at math. Don't be modest about it.
Hey, if you work hard at math, it's all good. That's all. That's the most important thing. Is hard at math.
She does really well in school, man. We're proud of her, and you know she's a good kid.